Okay. Well, there's no... I don't have any camera, but I don't know what this is. Nothing. Alright. Well, this is a handful of planeswalkers and nothing else. No good. This is a handful of ramp and no land. The wrong type of ramp. No good. This is a hand with just the right sort of stuff. Nothing insane. Pretty average hand. Definitely a keep. What am I getting rid of? Probably the Sky Shroud Lookout. So it doesn't really fit into the curve. I want the Proliferate at 1. I like Elspeth Conquers Death for hitting the midnight clock. And oh, I realise I've got a black screen on recording. That's usually going to have my face on that, so let me try hide that. There we go. Alright. Cool. This pathway is going to start giving us the white mana. Welcoming Vampire is nice if we do manage to get the ultimate. It's a little bit of wishful thinking given our opponent is on blue-black control. It seems they were holding up removal, so we are going to get Ajani on turn 4, which is unfortunate. That could give us a Welcoming Vampire angle for turn 3, but I'm not a massive fan. We could also go for Ajani on 3 if they tap out this turn. They do with the midnight clock, so this turn I will play Ajani on 3 mana. Usually I'm not a big fan of playing Ajani for the Phyrexian mana, but against a deck like Dimir, getting that's an interesting option. I think I'm going to bottom it though. Nothing we can do about the Rusko. Next turn is Contagious Vorak. Decide if we want the land or the Proliferate then and there. Okay, next turn's sort of lined up nicely. I can either go for Elspeth Conquers Death or the Welcoming Vampire plus the card draw. Either way, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plus Ajani, as there's no way I'm getting the ultimate this turn. So I may as well take the +1 and make a more informed analysis of the turn, I suppose. So Paragon is a nice thing to put down for 4 mana. I'm only playing Vorak anyway, so I will play the Serra Paragon here. Looks like they might have a Flicker spell or a Bounce spell. I hope it's not a Bounce spell, as now Ajani is going down to 1 loyalty, and already the game is looking pretty over, unfortunately. Just not being able to get the early ultimate off on Ajani is pretty bad. That indicates that they have some kind of removal for Ajani. If they don't remove it at all, I'm suspecting a stifle effect, so it could be... Okay, interesting. I'm not going to bother with the double proliferation, so I will draw a card first. It seems like it. It seems like they have a stifle effect, so I'm going to double spell here. Just need to determine if I want to use the Welcoming Vampire or the Bloated Contaminator, and I think I do want the Bloated Contaminator. I don't think I want the Contagious Vorak here, as the Proliferate doesn't do anything until next turn. So here I'm going to put 2 blockers down, so hopefully they can't just attack Ajani next turn. I can only assume here that they have something like a Sheoldred's Edict. Okay, a bounce spell. That is not the most scary thing in the world. I can still put it down at 5 or at 4 loyalty next turn, take it up to 5, be in the same position, just back a turn with the proliferate effect in hand. But likely next turn instead I'm going to try and play the Elspeth Conquers Death on one of their midnight clocks. Or if they keep missing the land drops, consider playing it on Rusko. However, if they're missing land drops, then likely they have a lot of stuff to do in their hand. Not really an exciting prospect to deal with, but it's likely what's going on. And yes, the full pass, they don't do anything at all. So anything here I play is going to be basically counterspell fodder. I can't really pair the Elspeth Conquers Death nicely with a second card, as I only have 2 mana afterwards. I could play the Sarah Paragon and a 3-drop. I could play Ajani and a 3-drop, but they do have counter magic and they are going to flip this midnight clock. What I really want to happen is for this clock to flip into a lot of nothing. So I am still interested, I think, in trying to play something here. Passing is an interesting option though. Definitely leads to me having many or much more resources. So I'm actually going to make that decision. I'm going to be aggressive. And as I believe my opponent is going to try and stop me from using the Ajani ultimate. So with both this proliferate trigger and this proliferate trigger, I could get them, but I believe just ending the turn here is going to be quite annoying for them, as they get to choose between drawing more cards, end of turn, which doesn't do anything with Midnight Clock. Okay, they have removal, makes sense. I'm going to lose the Bloated Contaminator here, as mana is really valuable to cast multiple spells. If they do anything else here, they're going to lose their hand. They also don't have access to multiple black sources. There's the mana from the Midnight Clock before it gets shuffled away. And actually, because their hand was so good there, means they're really actually behind on mana now, which is not the usual position for Rusko to be in. Essence Flux is pretty good for them though, starting to rebuild the mana, also rebuilding to another new hand. And very likely that they're hitting land drops now that they've drawn another 7. But ultimately, best case scenario for me is that they don't hit a single land drop and then they can't do anything with their hand. But alas, there is a new land drop. Next turn they're also going to lose their hand due to that Midnight Clock, or they're just going to lose their hand straight away. They missed the 1 mana floating there, so that may or may not matter. I don't know their hand. But now instead of having 4 mana in the main phase, they have access to 3. We'll see if that matters. Mind Stone, it sure did matter. Now, we are on 13, so we are dying at a reasonable speed here. The same story as last turn. I can't really go Elspeth Conquers Death plus another spell, which makes that option less appealing, but I do like Sarah Paragon, plus a spell from the graveyard if I can get away with it, so I will try that here. Eating the counter spell, and Memory Lapse is completely fine. Here I'm going to play the Welcoming Vampire. I am going quite low on life though, So perhaps the Vorak is actually better. I do lose the Sarah Paragon though, and I quite value that card, so I do want to keep it on top here. Draws another counterspell from them, so here I'm going to 9, any spell will put me to 8, 7, 6, etc. I also have to start being wary of all of the Storm Giants, as that will just kill me if unblocked. Sacrificing the Mind Stone, suggesting they don't have as much action in the hand this time, which also means they don't have as much mana, but Fatal Push is a reasonable reason to loot away that. Here I believe I'm going to go for Elspeth Conquers Death. There's no way I can really play it advantageously. What I would really like to do is Sarah Paragon, have that countered, and play Elspeth Conquers Death behind it to get rid of Rusko. Unfortunately, that's not an option here, so I'm just going to risk it. Resolves. I could target Rusko or the Midnight Clock. I'm going to target the Midnight Clock. Rusko is potentially more scary, but what I'm really doing is playing around a flicker effect. And they flicker their own, well, they bounce, return their own Rusko. Here I'm going to Contagious Vorak, and I'm going to proliferate on the Elspeth Conquers Death, as I would like for them not to be able to cast any spells for this turn. That way I can try and resolve my spells with more protection. I also get something free from the graveyard, which is likely going to be a Bloated Contaminator, as it's just a big body on this board. Welcoming Vampire, it's okay as well, but I like the Bloated Contaminator. Having the Proliferate on the body with the +1/+1 counter is pretty nice, as now it will grow itself when it attacks. Here I can also play the Sarah Paragon first, and then if they elect to counter this card, I will also get to play Ajani behind it quite efficiently. Scatter Ray comes down, I will pay 4, as that's the same as playing Ajani behind it anyway. It does resolve, but I don't get any value. I'm not in the biggest mood to attack, as one removal spell will make me lose, so I won't attack, and they're just playing all the cards now anyway. It doesn't change my decision though. Midnight Clock, and then 2 removal spells win the game for them at this point, or just 3 spells of any kind. Duress comes down, so that's going to take away Ajani. I'm now dead to 2 spells. I don't really have access to life gain, but I do through Sarah Paragon in a sort of weird way. It is delayed though. When the permanent I cast leaves the battlefield. So here I can play Welcoming Vampire and the Arboreal Grazer, which I will. And I will happily sacrifice the Welcoming Vampire if necessary. Play all my creatures. Now I will attack, I think. With both cards, I believe as well, as it looks like if I'm losing enough creatures for an attack, for them to hit my life total, then I'm losing to spells being cast anyway, so I'm going to attack with both here. Otawara comes down. If I I get to sacrifice or kill off my own welcoming vampire, I do get some life back, which is very good. And it seems they don't have 2 spells yet, so there is hope. Maybe not much of it. I have a few choices to play. They could be sitting on counter spells, but there's not going to be much I can do about that anyway. I'm going to play Catilda, as I think it's much more valuable than the other card. This also gets me to draw for now. Also one that I want to die. I'm going to play Ajani here as well. I would like to use the -3 ability to give my things vigilance and actually attack. What I can't do is attack with a Contagious Vora because they have a 7/7 blocker. So I will merely target my flyers. And I'll give the extra counter to the welcoming vampires. I do want it to die at some point. I will also play out all my hand as somehow I've got to win, and winning involves them to miss a couple cards. Scry 2, this could be game over, lights out for me here, but double Scry 2 to the bottom does give some hope. We'll see if it substantiates into anything for them. They just need 2 spells. Ritual of Soot comes down, but now I do gain 4 life back. I do lose a lot of creatures, however, so not the greatest. But this does give me a little bit of a buffer here, and they don't have an instant in hand to win the game. So still some breathing room, and I do get to recast some cards back. What I'd like to do here is play a lot of cards in hand. I would like to put a counter on the Bloated Contaminator, and then I'd like to play the Contagious Vorak. Likely what I should be doing here is using the +1 first, so I have missequenced this a little bit. Okay, don't need land at this point. And I shall play the Vorak. Sarah Paragon doing a lot of work, just making sure I don't die. But I do have to survive another... Oops. I did not mean to select that. I meant to proliferate there. That was unfortunate. Not my intention at all. Proliferating onto the Contaminator, I get to -3 Ajani on the Contaminator as well. Gets pretty big. They can't block it with their 7/7, and it can help proliferate the board even larger. So, an unfortunate misplay, and it does put me more behind in a position where I could have pulled ahead quite sharply. But there's no way I can draw that before this flips, because this is going to be at the beginning of the upkeep. So unfortunately that has to flip to the bottom, and I have to make this hand work, which is going to be quite difficult. I'm going to play the Esper Sentinel, just on the off chance it can tax the opponent's life, or not life, but resources. Now we see the blink effect come down immediately, so that the clock can immediately tick to 12, and it's likely going to be game over here. I had one chance there to, at instant speed, remove Rusko from the board, and that could have been sufficient to win the game. However, now I am no longer in that position. What I will do is I will attack with both the Bloated Contaminator and the Serra Paragon, and I shall keep both the other cards to block. I am dead to Ritual of Soot, but I'm not going to play around one card given the board state at the moment. And I'm just going to play both my creatures. I'm not going to play... Okay, they could have cast that instead, which is interesting. I could play Paradise Druid and pass, or I could just pass the turn. But then they let Lotus Cobra resolve, so it's an interesting choice. I will pass the turn, as if they play 3 removal spells, I lose anyway, just to the Rusko activation. So again, I have to hope they cannot triple cast here. Very unlikely, but revealing 2 lands in hand gives me some hope. Ah, they draw a card. Unfortunate. Now they just need 2 spells to win. That's 1 spell. Do let me... Oh, that doesn't let me draw, and that is the last spell. Good game, opponent. The misplay with selecting the land and proliferate. I didn't do the calculations, but that quite likely could have actually been the difference there in the end. Not that I think my opponent played perfectly either. I think Rusko is quite a struggle to win. But I do think from what my opponent did that game that there were definitely improvements on their side as well. Oh. And they're offline for me for some reason. Why are you offline? I shall investigate. Okay, they are back. Possibly a restart happening. We have game 2. I should be on the draw. That's not something. Sorry, I should be on the play. That's not something I checked. This will be a restart if that isn't the case. It is the case, and I'm looking at a hand without access to white mana, short of the Scrap Gorger. The chances that this all pays off is very slim, given 1 removal spell and my hand does absolutely nothing. So while it's the sort of thing I want to be doing, I cannot keep it. This also similarly isn't perfect. I really want to be playing Ajani on turn 3 if I can. This does lean into a more aggressive playstyle, however. I do have a 3 powered 2-drop with a 3 powered evasive 3-drop into an aggressive facing Ajani, but as well as this Ajani as well. This ultimately can also still give me the angle of the ultimate, as this does effectively proliferate by giving me loyalty counters. Here, before anything else, I'm going to have a look at their hand. If this does not get countered, I will have complete information and make my life a lot easier when making decisions. I expect this will get countered if possible, but it looks like they have removal here. And they do. Both Cut Down and Heartless Act are there. Spell Pierce is going to be quite annoying. So is Midnight Clock. Can I outrace Midnight Clock? Potentially. I dislike that they could Spell Pierce my commander. However, I can also play around that by not casting my commander in a advantageous spot for the opponent. So here I'm going to make their mana awkward by taking away their midnight clock. Potentially a mistake as well, really banking on the chance that they don't get to play Rusko on turn 4. Looking at another pass the turn from the opponent there. Now I have access to Tamio's Safekeeping alongside another 3-drop. I can also try and cast Ajani as well. So I'm going to go for the attack here. Looks like it's all going through. And I believe I should be playing the Contagious Vorak, as it's not really a valuable card, but it does still add pressure. And anything I played there was going to get countered at the very least. And here I still have access to protection if they want to remove one of my creatures. He was seeing Rusko, which is going to leave them up Spell Pierce. So best case here is if I can find a Plains for God Eternal Ketcher, although I'm not even sure that's the best, as they can just kill it with the Heartless Act. That being said, we still did get access to said Plains, but in the interest of beating the Spell Pierce, I'm going to play Ajani for 3 mana, which is going to leave me open 2 mana left, so that Spell Pierce cannot effectively counter the Ajani. I will still be giving up, however, the Tamio's Safekeeping. And we get a good hit. If we don't attack, we lose Ajani, so I will attack to put them down to 10. We still lose Ajani here, unfortunately. But I've sort of pivoted from the ultimate idea with Ajani to being aggressive. Fortunately, their hand is quite conducive to ruining aggression with the double removal spell. And I lose my whole board. If I can find a land next turn, I can play God Eternal Catcher with protection. And if I can keep her alive, I can actually win the game quite handily, because I'm going to get in board state that is out of control. I've also got to beat a counter spell, however, but I'm going to predict Midnight Clock activation to be used here, and I'm just going to be gutsy and go for the God Eternal Catcher. Does resolve. They could also have a bounce spell, but indeed there is the Midnight Clock activation that I predicted. If I can play God Eternal, the Eternal Wanderer next turn, I can also reset all the clocks. They do sadly have removal though. I will put it on top as it's a nice way to win the game if I can get it going. So just having it as a recursive top deck seems quite good. Here I'm more or less praying for a land. If I can get land plus Eternal Wanderer, I can keep their Midnight Clocks off. Without the land, I believe I am in big trouble because they're going to get a new hand. It's pretty simple. This is the point where if I'm really trying in the league, I get depressed that my 1 out didn't show up. Well, it's not my 1 out, it's just all the 38% chance, but anyway. It is what it is, and I don't have the 6th land, which was quite important. I could try Sarah Paragon plus the Safekeeping for the turn, which is exactly what I am going to do. It's quite unfortunate that I didn't draw the 6th land either for the Safekeeping on God Eternal Catcher or for the Eternal Wanderer the turn after. both of those plays would have given me a lot more chances in this game that now I do not have. So now I need to hope for some suboptimal draws from the opponent. I also still need to hope that this card on top is a land, otherwise I'm blanking for the turn after as well. Likely I lose in that scenario. Oh, I didn't even see the spell. Okay, well, I'm done. I was too busy mousing over cards and explaining things that I didn't get to play my safekeeping in response. I still lose to a counterspell there anyway, but the game was over when I didn't get the 6th land, either 2 turns there. Not saying it was too unlikely to happen, as it's just 38% of, well, it's the inverse, so it would be 62% of 62%. Which is somewhere around 40%. So there was a 40% chance for the events there to happen, and they happened. I still also managed to draw the planes more or less when I wanted it as well. Either way, I had not a good matchup whatsoever for Ajani. Against tier 1 decks, Ajani is going to struggle against control. It's better odds against a fairy than against Rusko, but anyway, we'll see if I can get a win against some of my other opponents for week 1. I don't believe any of them are favourable, and Ajani definitely had its heyday 2 months ago, where it could beat stuff like Atraxa quite handedly. It could beat all the value piles, but it could also beat the aggressive decks as well that tried to take advantage of the control meta, while still not being completely dead against control. So I thought I'd give it a go, as I don't really have any aspirations for this season. I don't really have the time, so give it a whirl again. But anyway, that's my first game.